All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. At least for me, it is. It's afternoon. Um, my name is Sypher. At least that's what I'm known as in the FGC. Um, that's Sypher, Sypher. So, as you can imagine, the topic of this video is mostly going to be Dead or Alive. Now, I've got the Dead or Alive 4 cover art pulled up here on my screen because this is where I got my start in the franchise, officially, at least. Um, but I don't know how long this video will be. It depends on what's on my mind, what comes to mind rather, and what I feel like I want to speak on about. Um, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself, just as an introductory, and then get into the topic of this video, which is of course Dead or Alive, and and probably my hopes for the future of this game. Um, but yeah, so yeah, let's get into it. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in New Jersey. That's where I was born and raised. After I finished middle school, I moved to Texas. Um, did my high school there, a little bit of college, and then I would eventually join the Navy in 2012, and I'm still actually serving currently. I did some active duty time, but now I'm a reservist. So, and my profession is in IT. I don't really have a specialization at the moment, but I'm mostly like customer service type stuff, you know. Um, but yeah, so where did my name come from? You're probably wondering, because, like I said, like you probably don't know me. Some people do in the DOA community, but I'm not very widely known across the FGC in general. I'm just, I'm practically your average Joe, if I'm being honest. But yeah, where'd my name come from? So, um, years ago in the OG Xbox days, I used to play Halo with my uncle, who was only a couple years older than me. So he was practically a brother. And whenever I would go to his place, we would sometimes play video games together. And Halo was one of them, right? And if any of you guys remember, you could, create your own custom name, whenever you start the campaign and whatnot, and make a save file. And I remember playing co-op with him one time, and we had to make our names, right? So his name, if I remember correctly, that he made was Chrono, kind of like I think that was a callback to Chrono Trigger, which I remember him playing briefly. And then I just kind of like just made something up off the top of my head. I just put Sypher. Um, and outside of that, I didn't really use that nickname for anything really for the longest time. So, but it wasn't until the Xbox 360 days where I would come to use that name again. So, in my teenage years, my stepfather, he, you know, for whatever reason, he was like on a, I remember him being like on a shopping spree. He just wanted to, ball out and get, buy things for what, I don't know. But I guess, he felt like spoiling me at the time. And he asked me what I wanted, and I said, I want a 360. Um, and, you know, at the time, the consoles that I was usually, playing on, were, so what I grew up on was the Super Nintendo, and then I would, go to the N64, and then the GameCube, and then eventually a Wii. So a lot of my childhood was revolved around Nintendo consoles, um, and a little bit of PlayStation as well. But the consoles that I owned, that I played on mostly were Nintendo, right? So this was my first like branch off from Nintendo at the time. I want to say this was like 2008 or 9 or something, more or less. And so, I was like, yeah, I want a 360, And I guess, after that, then he, wanted to get me some games. And, I remember him, just showing me a list of stuff, and this one caught my eye somehow. And I vaguely remembered seeing it at school one time. One of my friends was showing it off in class, like, hey, look at this game I got. So it kind of stuck out to me. I was like, oh, I recognize that image, And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get that. And I get it, and eventually I may, start my own collection of 360 games. And you know, like long story short, I ended up falling in love with this game. And mind you, up to this point, like fighting games, at least up till that point, weren't really a huge part of my life. Like, I definitely enjoyed fighting games from time to time, but it never really became my focus until now, really, thanks to this game. I used to dabble with, Street Fighter. Like I remember playing Super Street Fighter as a kid, and then the Alpha 2 I remember playing a lot as a kid. What else? I would eventually become familiar with Tekken, of course. My first Tekken was, I believe, Tekken 3. You know, so I was familiar with Tekken, and I was also familiar with Guilty Gear, and a lot of different franchises that I would dabble in, but never commit to. But Dead or Alive 4 is where that all changed for me, and from what I understand, for most people nowadays, at least in this current generation, a lot of people got their start in Dead or Alive 4, or to some degree, this game has sentimental value for like a lot of people. Even though, it wasn't the best of the series, at least competitive wise or mechanically, whatever you want to call it. But this is like one of the, gems, so to speak. Um, and, I wasn't really familiar with Dead or Alive. When I first got this game, I wasn't too familiar with it. Like, I vaguely remembered dabbling a little bit on a couple occasions with Dead or Alive 3, like in very rare instances, came across the game, but I didn't have an Xbox at the time, so this wasn't on my radar. It was just something that I saw once in a while. Excuse me. But like I said, it all changed with Dead or Alive 4. So I get to playing it, and I pretty much fell in love with it, to say the least. Like there's really not much else to say. It was just an instant hit for me. You know, it played like no other fighting game that I was familiar with. Granted, I wasn't well versed in fighting games. I know there's like a plethora in fighting games, whether it be the big fighting games or the lesser well known ones. Um, but by and large, like the whole fighting game genre, you know, wasn't as huge to me yet. Like I didn't have like a huge, scope on it, for lack of a better word. Um, but with Dead or Alive 4, I instantly fell in love with it. It was fast, it was smooth, it was amazing, and probably one of the things coincidentally that drew me to it was the hold mechanic, which is practically what it's known for. Um, like it's pretty much one of the main things that sets it apart from other fighting games. Like it's not just your normal parry. Like yeah, there's parry. Some games have like parry mechanics or whatnot, or parry moves. Depending on what fighting game you're talking about. But the way that it was designed in this game, just, it caught my attention really quickly, like, oh wow, I can, if I guess right, or make the right read, I can, counterattack and, shift the momentum in my favor. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the animations were just amazing. Like the way they designed, these specific, animations for holds and whatnot. It's like, damn, that looks pretty badass. Or, wow, man, that looks painful. And I could go into a rant about it, about the design, and how much what I love about it, but I don't know if I have enough time for that. But it just the way the game was designed, even though I didn't fully understand it at the time, it just it really caught my eye and caught my attention. And this would be a game that I would pour hours into, and of course I wasn't that great at first, but over time I would learn the intricacies of the system and how it ought to be played and whatnot, and and then another magical part about this game for me was this being this is my first 360s, like my first online console. I didn't have a concept of online play at the time as well until I got a 360 and made my first account, which, by the way, going back to my name, I made my first Xbox account, and of course you have to make your own screen name. And I was like, oh yeah, what about that Sypher name that I used to rock a long time ago, kinda. So yeah, I'm gonna use that. So like, if I remember correctly, my first Xbox account ended up being something like X underscore Sypher underscore X or something like that. And that would be my tag for the foreseeable future. And little by little, I started making friends because of this game. Um, because like, and aside from this game, the only other game that I really played at the time, like a lot of, was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. At this time, also coincidentally, because of online play, you know, I started falling in love with certain games. So Dead or Alive 4 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 were like two of my most played games at the time. I would constantly flip back and forth between the two because I was just so in love with those games. Um, I mean, I played a lot of other games too, but DOA 4 and Modern Warfare 3 were like my two probably most played games during the 360 era. Um, During this time, at least until, of course, DOA 5 came out. But anyways, we'll get to that. So yeah, I played countless hours of this game on end. I always looked forward to playing it. I would eventually make friends, through online play, and then little by little, with the help of certain people, which I wish I could remember their names, but certain people would be like, hey, let me help you out. I think you're pretty good. You have potential, So I would slowly learn how to play better, you know, through some of my online friends, And eventually I did, actually my defense started getting better and stuff like that. And, eventually then, of course, uh, I would, find myself on YouTube, trying to look up, content for this game. And one of the, things that stood out to me was, if you guys remember, for at least for the DOA community, this game was featured on something called CGI, or and then later on would be CGS. And it was like a gold mine for me. Like, wow, there's actually people playing this competitively, like, on a large scale, like, face to face, and competing for money or whatever, And that was just a huge culture shock for me because, I didn't have any concept of a fighting game community yet. And that just, opened up my eyes, like, oh shit, there's like a whole world out there. Like, people come together and play this game, like, seriously. Like it was just amazing, you know what I'm saying? Like imagine, being so cut off from the world in a sense, like, you know, outside of, like maybe, your local group of friends, your neighborhood friends, school friends, whatever. But then there's people, online or across the world that you can connect with and play games with, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of things were opening up to me, my eyes were opening up to like what I would, learn to be what the FGC was because of this game, And so when I found those videos on CGI and CGS and whatnot, like I said, it was a gold mine. Like I would replay so many of those videos nonstop, just to try to get a sense of, how this game is meant to be played, and if there was a specific character I wanted to get better with, or whatever, I would look for specific matches, to on certain characters to see, how people play them and, try to get, an understanding of how they're supposed to be played and whatnot, and the mentality of these players, Sometimes I would just watch it for, for leisurely reasons, just because, not because I'm, trying to learn something, but just because it's just fun to watch, you know what I'm saying? But and of course, that would also be how I would um come to discover, a lot of big figureheads and big names in the DOA community at the time, like, Master or Perfect Legend, Vanessa, Mystic, who else? Swoozy, Offbeat Ninja, um, shoot, who else? Like there was a lot. Black Mamba, um, yeah, like just those are just to name a few off the top of my head. But yeah, that was how I discovered a lot of these, notable players was through YouTube, you know, and it was just amazing to me. It was like wow, like it was just inspiring. And then eventually I would come to discover, I don't remember how I came across it, um, but I would also come to discover, online forums, for this game, like, DOA Central. I know that was a big place to, come together for a long time, you know. Um, and, I would, browse DOA Central and see what people were talking about this game, whether it be, just general discussions or strats, whatever, like I was in there just looking for things, you know, to help broaden my knowledge and experience with this game. It was great. It was really great. And then, of course, later on in the years, uh, Matt Ponton would uh, create the Free Step Dodge website, which became the new home for Dead or Alive eventually. I don't even know if VOA Central still exists now, or if people still even go there. But and a lot of the community, at least most of them would, eventually migrate to Free Step Dodge, you know, which was, in my opinion, a slightly better designed form for the game. So shout outs to Matt Ponton for that, you know. Um, I think back in the day he used to go by different names too, like Mr. Wah or Sorwa or something like that. Which I don't know if people still call him that these days, but I just know him by Matt or Ponton, Matt Ponton, But anyways, so yeah, yeah, this game I just fell in love with, Played it a lot, sometimes I would enter like online competitions or exhibitions or whatever, Um, I know at the time some people like there were like some clans out there, but I wasn't really interested in joining any clans, But yeah, like this game was, like a treasure to me for such a long time, and I played it religiously. Um, and funny enough, I didn't really have a main in this game at least, like I would experiment with a lot of characters, I want to say one of the first characters that I, really got serious with was Ryu Hayabusa. If anything, he was probably one of my main characters. But, I would, experiment, with most of the cast at least, over time. But I think I usually gravitated towards Hayabusa and I think Kasumi sometimes, or even Ain, perhaps. But yeah, I think maybe Hayabusa was probably like my most played in DOA 4 at least, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there were so many things I loved about this game. The way that it played, it was just like in my to me it was like revolutionary. It was like wow, this is an amazing game. Like and I know for a lot of people outside of the DOA community, like this game is like kind of like I don't want to say I don't think Black Sheep is the right word, but it's like one of those less popular games. You know, I wish this game didn't have such a bad stigma around it, but it really is amazing, and I appreciate the people who stick with it. You know, and make the community what it is. But I understand why this game might shy people away. Whether it be the game design, the system, or whatever. You know, like people are used, to having, people like in general like prefer guaranteed damage. Like if like just to reference Tekken for an example, like if you get a counter hit, that's guaranteed damage. You get rewarded for making the right read, and then you get a full launch or a full combo off of that counter hit or whatever, and that's it. But then with a game like DOA, you know, yeah, you could stun somebody, but nothing is guaranteed. There's a chance the opponent might guess correctly or make the right read on you, and your offense is shut down. So it's like a constant momentum shift. And just the way this game is played in general is just different from what people, I guess, are used to or what they prefer. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I like how aggressive this game is too. Like the game kind of forces you to like be in your face. Like it's high octane action. Yeah, you could turtle a little bit or whatnot, and do some spacing or whatever. But overall, the game encourages you to be in your opponent's face and just kick the shit out of them. You know what I'm saying? Whereas other games, it's not so much the same. The way they're designed. Except maybe with the exception of Virtual Fighter. You have a lot of the a lot of the fights are close combat, but you know, um, but for the most part, the flow of most 3D fighting games is just different. But with DOA, it's just fast. It can be really fast paced, and it gets snowball really fast as well. So, um, but yeah, that's another. I'm not like I said. I'm not gonna try to get on too much of a tangent. You know, on my views on how the game's designed and whatnot, and try to like spark a debate or whatever. But the main focus is to try to get my thoughts and opinions and feelings out there. You know, um, but yeah, this game was just amazing to me. I love the characters. Uh, I never really cared about the whole, stigma about the whole DOA being sexualized or whatever. That kind of stuff didn't really matter to me. Although I will admit though, I kind of understand people's uh, perception on that point because of course for those of you who may know, like this game also got its own spin-off series called Dead or Alive Extreme, and in my opinion, I wish those games never existed. Because I think those games mainly basically exacerbated that stigma that it probably already had. You know, like yeah, every fighting game is gonna have some sort of sex appeal to some degree, But unfortunately, DOA is known for pushing that a little bit past the norm, you know, with the whole bouncing jiggle physics or whatever, that was different, but I don't think people really cared that much about it at the time. But it's like with the DOA Extreme series, the creator at the time, Itagaki, may he rest in peace, um, he wanted to, capitalize on that sex appeal and, make that into its own thing. And, for better or worse, that's what it became, he created the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball 1 and 2. And, those are just gooner games. Excuse me. They were gooner games, plain and simple. But, if that's your thing, hey, I'm not going to knock anybody who likes that. Obviously, there's an audience for games like that, and if that's your thing, then, excuse me, more power to you. I mean, and if it makes some money, sure, why not, You know, and, I could see from a marketing standpoint how that'd be a good idea. And of course, whatever profit they make off of those games can be, probably put back towards the main fighting game, you know what I'm saying? But in my opinion, it just hurt the image of DOA in the long run, you know, because now you can't think about Dead or Alive without being like, oh, the fighting game or the titty game or the volleyball game or whatever, And that's what now they have a dating sim game or something like that. They just took that and ran with it, you know. I don't even know what that is anymore. It used to be like a beach volleyball getaway game, and now it's like a dating sim type of thing or whatever. I don't know. I don't really keep up with that side of DOA. But like I said, I feel like those particular games just, didn't do any justice for the franchise itself when it was already a niche, you know, game to begin with or IP. But that's just my stick on it. I don't, like I said, I don't want to get too far off the rails, but in my opinion, probably I could be wrong, but if it wasn't for those games, I think people would respect DOA a little bit more, at least a little bit. Who knows? But like I said, whatever, there's a game for everybody. I'm glad that people like those games. More power to them. But for me personally, I never cared too much about them or whatever. I mean, I get it. At the end of the day, even if sex appeal isn't really pushed in your face, no matter what game it is or fighting game or whatever, gooners are gonna goon no matter what. They're gonna find a way to sexualize, female characters or even male characters one way or another. That's just how people are. With fandoms and whatnot. But anyways, to each his own, right? But yeah. So like I said, this game opened up a whole new world for me. And I loved it. I loved playing online. The lobby system was really cool for Dead or Alive 4. And it was just an amazing game to me, and it opened up doors for me to discover the FGC as a whole, you know. Um, but yeah, this game is where I started to take fighting games seriously. Like damn, I want to compete in this game too. Like I actually started like dreaming about being in tournaments or whatever. And at the time I didn't really have the means to do so. And I never really, you know, found anybody around me, or at least I never tried to, at least to find people around me who played this game as well. I know there was a scene in Dallas, maybe. I think there's still a scene in Dallas, probably. And that's when I also discovered, DOA in Dallas or DID, you know. Um, but I was too young at the time to travel. Um, but I told myself one day I'm gonna get out there and compete in these games, and hopefully I can meet Master one day and all these other people, you know. Um, But yeah, this is when I really started taking fighting games seriously. Like, I really wanted to get good, you know what I'm saying? And eventually I would come to collect all the other older DOA games, because, DOA 360 had backwards compatibility. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I picked up DOA Ultimate, it was a two game package, DOA 1 Ultimate and DOA 2 Ultimate, you know. Obviously, at this time, unfortunately, the DOA 2U servers were closed, so I never got a chance to experience that game online. But I wanted to collect them anyway, just to have them because I love DOA. Eventually I would get my hands on DOA Dimensions, and then you know finally here comes DOA 5 around 2012. So you know what that means. I was on that game like white on rice. I was so excited, like so excited. Finally, a new DOA game. Because I mean, at the time the scene wasn't dead. There were still a lot of people playing, but DOA 5 was like revitalized the community, of course. Such a great game as well. Um, but yeah, eventually, I would join the military, like I said, in 2012, and DOA 5 was out at the time. Um, and so eventually I would find opportunities here and there to compete, to travel. I think the very first tournament that I ever attended was NorCal Regionals, maybe, but I didn't make it in time to compete. I just went there as a spectator. Um, yeah, that was probably the very, very first tournament that I ever, witnessed or attended. Because I had the time to go. I was in the Navy. I didn't have duty that at that time. I didn't have to stand watch or whatever. So I went. I think I left on a Saturday morning. To go attend the tournament and just be a spectator. Um, but this was actually back in like I want to say that was 2014 or 15. I want to say it was probably 2014 when I came across NorCal Regionals. Um, but yeah, and then of course I met one of my longtime friends. Uh, his name's Julian, but he goes by I am Luigi or something like that. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Um, I don't remember if that's what his. I don't think that's what he went by at the time. I think he was. I don't remember if he was going by. What was? I remember at one time he went by Shun's Fury, and then eventually he changed his name to Luigi Fanu or something. I don't know. I feel bad just thinking about like, damn, why do I not remember what he used to call himself at the time? But anyways, he's been a long time friend of mine, even to this day. What's up, buddy? I'm doing a video.
Is it Thursday?
No, it's Saturday, buddy.
Today's Saturday?
Yeah. Okay. Hey, go watch your TV, okay?
I say
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yes, today's Saturday. Now go watch your TV with Vincent.
Saturday.
Yep. Go.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Go. Go over there. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. That's my son, y'all. By the way, I'm also a dad right now. I got two boys. So yeah, uh, yeah. So I would eventually meet him because at the time I was stationed in San Diego, and I ended up meeting with him. Um, and we got together, played some games, and the rest is history. We've been best buds ever since. So shout out to him for any of you guys that may know him as well. Give him a shout out as well. Say what's up. But yeah, DOA 5 is running is fresh at the time. I would eventually to come to meet a lot more people. I know one of the biggest, one of the hottest, players at the time was Excalibur Blades, if I remember correctly. um, well, actually, if this was like 2014 or 15, I want to say DOA 2. I mean, I'm sorry, DOA 5 Ultimate was probably out already. Can't remember. But anyways, while I was in the military, if I was lucky enough to make it to a tournament, I would definitely go. Like, if I had the time, if I didn't have any responsibility to attend to, I would make it my business to go. I didn't, as long as it wasn't too far. So I went as much as I could at the time, but of course it wasn't very often, unfortunately. It was very rare opportunity that I would get to travel, but, at least I had the capability, you know. Since I was by myself, I didn't have to answer to nobody. I was making my own money, so I would try to travel whenever I could, for these tournaments. And, I never really placed very high for like a long time, you know. Never a top player by any means, but I always strive to be the best I could be. Like I used to used to imagine myself being on the same stage as some of the best players out there.
Hey, Daddy.
What, Dante?
Sonic says you want these?
No, I don't want them. Actually, no, give me. Thank you. Yes, go.
You can just eat it.
Okay, thank you. Close the door. Oh, kids. But you know, like there's so many names out there. Like like damn, I wish I could fight against Quiggles one day or Sonic Fox. Rakudo, XCal. Who else? Who else were some really big names? Sweet Revenge, Lapido. So many players that I would watch in these tournaments, and keep up with. Because if I wasn't going to tournaments, I was definitely watching them, on stream or even watching the VODs, you know. And, every once in a while I would communicate with these peoples, in the forums or the Facebook groups or whatever. Um, but yeah, I always dreamed about, being one of the best, but never got there, unfortunately. Um, there was one tournament though that that I actually made top three in, and it was Summer Jam of 2018. It was in yeah, it was Summer Jam 2018. The tournament was held like at the end of August. Um, and I made top three at that tournament. Now, granted, at this time, DOA 5 was kind of like at the tail end of its life cycle, because DOA 6 was around the corner. So, um, the game wasn't as booming as it used to be. At least I don't remember it was. But in this particular tournament, there was only like 24 entrants in total, you know, and but I made top three somehow. And second place was Ichiron, 47, I think his name was. And first place for that was B-Boy Dragon, or UGS B-Boy Dragon. And props to them. They played great. And somehow, like I said, somehow I got third. That's the only DOA tournament ever that I ever entered, or was able to enter rather, that I made top 8 or even top 3 for that matter. So I still have the medal in my car somewhere. I used to hang it up all the time. Which is funny though, because I remember thinking to myself, like damn, I wish more people entered this tournament. I was itching to fight some of the other top players. Like for the longest time I didn't give myself enough credit for that achievement because not all the heavy hitters were in attendance. So I felt like I almost got the short end of the stick. Not saying that some of the players that I fought against were good. They were definitely good. But I really wanted to get a crack at those, big names. You know what I'm saying? I really did, and then, unfortunately, a lot of them didn't show up. So, because of that, I didn't, give myself enough credit for my achievement. But eventually, I came around and accepted it, and, I'm proud of it still to this day. Third place, even if it was a small tournament, that's still a pretty big achievement overall, if you think about it, I guess. So, GG's to all the guys that, were at that tournament. One of my longtime friends as well as Gruff, said Gruff757. Um, I used to play with him a lot back then. Because for a long time, for like about 6 years and some change, I was stationed in Virginia, over in Norfolk, Virginia, over in the seven cities area, So I would eventually come to discover the Southern Virginia fighting game community, or SOVA for short. Shout out to all my SOVA peeps, if you come across this video. And that would be my first like offline community that I've ever been a part of, and I still miss them to this day. Like I met a lot of people, I made a lot of friends, through SOVA at the time, through various fighting games. And even though at the, DOA wasn't really one of the most notable or recognized games, I still would find people to play with, every now and then. And Gruff was, one of those people, even if he was the only other guy playing it, that was enough for me. So Gruff, if you're watching this, I miss you, bro. I appreciate, you playing DOA with me all those years, Um, but yeah, but then, like at over time, um, aside from DOA, I would eventually start, picking up other big games, Street Fighter was never really big on my radar, but I would play it from time to time. The other games that I would largely get involved with would be Tekken and Soul Calibur over time, Tekken 7 was where I would start competing in Tekken, Prior to that, wasn't that huge into Tekken, but with Tekken 7, you know, because DOA wasn't getting as much attention, I wanted to, broaden my horizon, I guess. So I would eventually get serious into Tekken 7, and compete with that every now and then when I could. So, um, I would eventually come to get to know a lot of players in the FGC or SOVA FGC that would, you know, have history with a multitude of games, whether it be MK, Tekken, etc., Street Fighter. So, it was a great place to be, great community to be a part of, to dip my toes in, different fighting games. But like I said, DOA, even when it was dying down, Tekken would be my other big game that I would put a lot of time into, and then Soul Calibur. With the release of Soul Calibur 6, that's when I started taking Soul Calibur really seriously, Of course, competitively, you know. Shout out to Dark Tesla. He'd probably kill me if I didn't shout him out. uh, I used to love and hate that guy. Fucking Aswell. Fuck you. But anyways, we're talking about DOA here. um, But yeah, yeah. So the Sova community was great. Right now I live in the Panhandle area of Florida, and we have a small scene here as well that kind of like merged into like from like the Pensacola area, and then some people from like Alabama or whatever. Um, and right now, some of our biggest games are, of course, Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8, and I think City of the Wolves as well. So glad to be a part of that community as well right now. But yeah, like I said, try not to get into too many tangents. Um, DOA, yeah. So where do we go from here, right? So unfortunately, like I haven't really taken DOA seriously in a long time, especially with the advent of games like DOA. I'm Tekken 7 coming out and Soul Calibur and all this other stuff. By the way, I mostly gear towards 3D fighters. I can dabble with 2D fighters as well, but 3D fighters is where my heart is at. You know, I would come to realize that over time. Um, but yeah, DOA 5 had its run. It was great, even with DOA 5 Ultimate and then last round. Super fun game, super great game. I would advise if anyone has never touched Dead or Alive before, definitely start with Dead or Alive 5 last round. It is such an amazing game. Or even Dead or Alive 6, they're both pretty different games, you know, but play whatever you like, Try Dead or Alive 5, and then, make your way to Dead or Alive 6 if you want to, see if you like that game better, you know. Excuse me. But yeah, it's an amazing game, And yeah, so with uh with Dead or Alive 6, I was so excited about that game for a while, and I was, eager to see where it would go. And, but unfortunately, its lifespan would be cut kind of short. And if you know, I'm not gonna try to get into the whole history about all that. If you were part of the DUA community, or if you're at least familiar with the workings of, you know, the community during that time and whatnot, and the development cycle of DOA 6, you know what happened to it. So I'm not gonna, get on another tangent. You know, Unfortunately, Dead or Alive 6, you know, basically fell on its ass before it could even take off. And it was quite unfortunate because I was so excited about the game. And unfortunately, with it was a mixed bag of things, like the way the game was designed, the mechanics, the changes they made to certain things in the game, you know, the freaking business practices, and whatnot, DLC, you know, and like I said, I'm not gonna get into it too much. If you know, you know. But unfortunately, that would kill the game. You know, any momentum that it was building up was just destroyed. Any potential that it could have had was destroyed. And that hurt a lot for me. Because I realized the reception the game was getting and the overall attitude towards the game. And it was bad enough that it's a niche title in the FGC, but for the way for it to go out, just it sucked. And so eventually over time, I would stop playing DOA, 6 or DOA in general overall, just completely. It was a slow simmer. Slowly I would play it less and less, and then eventually I just didn't pick it up anymore. Because it was like, what's the point? And you know, as much of a hardcore fan I was of it, it's like, why? Nobody's really playing it, around me that like that, at least not that much. Nobody seemed to care, you know. about it as much anymore, So it's like, why waste my energy? Because there's nothing going on for this game. Like, any potential, like I said, any potential I had was squandered. So I turned my attention to other games, Not that I had any big aspirations, with other titles, but I wanted to put my time and energy into games where I felt like, it mattered, But I don't know. Maybe I could have had a different attitude, but it is what it is. However, I will say that I appreciate the people who stuck with it, regardless. Like, for example, like people like Hoodless, Mike Emery or Emery Reigns, whatever he goes by, you know. Off the top of my head, those are two of some of the biggest, contributors or content creators for the game. If I'm missing anybody, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave you out. Probably just don't remember. But you know, I appreciate the effort that people are making to keep the game alive, even when it seems like it's dead. Hoodless is still holding regular, tournaments for the game. I know Emery still streams it from time to time when he's in the DOA mood, you know, and coincidentally, with Itagaki's passing, unfortunately, may he rest in peace. It's like it was a catalyst for a new resurgence of players playing the game somehow. It's weird how that works out, It took the original creator of Dead or Alive to freaking die for people to turn their attention towards DOA again, It's weird how that worked out, But for better or worse, it seems like more people are starting to, either come back to the game or even be newly introduced, which is great though, I am not against that. So it's great to see how there's been a slow uptick in interest in Dead or Alive. People are talking about it, People are making retrospective videos on it, or whatever, in the wake of, the tragic incident. But regardless, people are still talking about it. That's great. People are posting clips of gameplay and stuff like that. And that's great. That's great for the game. It's great for the community. I'm really hoping that Team Ninja is noticing this and and taking it to heart. And hopefully they got something in the works, even if it's not cooking yet. I really hope they're planning for something for this game, and maybe they're taking their time with it. I don't know. Maybe they have a strategy. I remember watching a discussion video. I think it was like a podcast or something between Mike Hollow. Shout out to you, by the way, bro, if you're watching this. Mike Hollow was interviewing various members of the DOA community from past to present, And I remember one of the guys, I think maybe Swoozy or something, he mentioned something like that there's a possibility that maybe, with Ninja Gaiden 4 coming out, and this video was recorded before Ninja Gaiden 4 came out. Maybe maybe Team Ninja's waiting to see how well the games that they're working on are doing first, and then use those profits to fund another DOA project. Could be entirely possible. I don't know, but it looks like Ninja Gaiden 4 took off, like it exploded. The reviews are overwhelmingly positive, which is great. The Ninja Gaiden games are amazing, So no surprise there. But I really hope that's the case. I really hope there, you know, I really hope there are people like in a secret lab somewhere, like, working on plans or cooking something up or whatever. I really hope that sometime in 2026, because we're in November now, November 2025, I really hope that sometime next year we'll hear news about another DOA game. That would be amazing. You know, especially with Virtua Fighter 6 in the works. You know, it'd be a perfect time to announce another Dead or Alive game. Perfect time. That'd be a great idea because we need more 3D fighters, man. We don't have enough of them. The ratio from 2D fighting games to 3D is heavily favored in 2Ds. We need some more variety, man. But you know, I don't have a particular wish list for DOA 7 as far as, how they'll make the game or whatever. I don't really have a creative mind like that. I would need more time to sit down and think about what can make this game great. What haven't they tried yet? Please though, please no more meter. That shit is whack. I'm sorry. Meter doesn't belong in a 3D game. I mean, maybe in some rare cases it kind of works. Like, I think Bloody Roar had a meter system or something back then. I don't know. But, yeah, I don't want to have to, the DOA is already a mixed bag as it is, like in a world, in the current, modern FGC era, like, people are tired of comeback mechanics, especially in 3D fighting games. Like, in 2D games, sure, it kind of fits in that realm, kind of. But in 3D fighters, in my opinion, it doesn't mix well. I mean, look at Tekken 8. I mean, granted, I love Tekken 8. I think it's fun. I think it also has a lot of bullshit, but it's still fun to me, you know. And with Soul Calibur, I mean, I guess it kind of works in there too, but it doesn't like, I don't know. In my opinion, it doesn't like, it kind of fits, you know. But in some games, it just feels like, meter comeback mechanics just don't really fit that well. Because if you think about it, holds in DOA are sort of like a comeback mechanic in itself, you know. So there's really no need for meter in a game like DOA at all, in my opinion. Like, do not do that shit again. I mean, no disrespect to Team Ninja, you know, I appreciate the effort, but it just, I don't know, it just doesn't work well in my opinion. Um, if I had to say anything, stick to what has worked in the past. Don't stray away from the core formula of the game. Nothing wrong with experimenting, and whatnot, but don't stick to the core formula of the game. Stick to what makes DOA DOA. Um, but excuse me. Yeah, like the like this game has the potential to be great, even greater than it's ever been. But I would highly advise them to uh listen to the community, take their opinions to heart, because and you know don't take anything too seriously. I know some people are going to be negative, like super negative or whatever, but you know also have a sharp eye and a sharp ear, for what you know people in the community say, because we're the ones that are going to keep your game alive at the end of the day, Um, so yeah, like I said, I don't have any particular wish list. Like, oh, what can they do to make DOA 7 better than DOA 6 or whatever. Um, I don't know. I guess super moves are fine. Like I know with DOA 5 they introduced power blow and power launcher, and that was kind of cool. You know. Um, but yeah, what they did with DOA 6 was just you know, it just wasn't it. Not that it's a terrible game, but it could have been a lot better. They could have done a lot more fine tuning to the game and stuff like that. A lot of more changes could have been made, but you know, support for the game got cut short. Um, but yeah, just I don't know, just don't go over the top, with the comeback stuff. We already have holds. We don't need much more than that. We got environments too. Wall combos. Destructible environments. Cliffhangers. That shit used to be cool. You know. Oh, please bring back tag mode, bro. I'm pretty sure they already know. They already know that people did not like that they took out tag mode. Tag mode is practically part of DOA's identity at this point, ever since DOA 2. You know, tag mode is so fun. Even though it's not, people don't really usually play tag at tournaments. It's still a very fun mode casually. And the game just gets even crazier in tag mode, because the combos are so much more floaty and you could be so much more creative. So yeah, please bring back tag mode, bro. And who knows, maybe, yeah, definitely keep the story mode too. I think the DOA 5 and 6's story modes were pretty good. They weren't, they weren't like, oh my god, amazing, but they were pretty good for what they were, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like story mode has become a staple in modern fighting games now too. So I hope that the story continues to do well in the DOA universe. But can we please just like, I don't know, can we like, I don't know, maybe it's intentional, but like, yo, Donovan has been along for so many years, in the DOA universe. When are we gonna finally get to kick him to the curb? He's always been this elusive figure in the DOA universe, and we never really saw his face, like, at all. um, I mean, I don't know, like, it would be nice to get a little bit of, I don't know if closure is the right word, but exposure more to the main villain behind that's been operating behind the scenes. You know what I'm saying? You know, leave. Obviously Rido's dead. Make him stay dead. Rido doesn't need to come back to life again. Well, all the Kasumi clones are dead, right, or something. Um, whatchamacallit? I don't know. Maybe Neo Tengu can come back as a villain, because she just came back as a playable character. There was really no story behind her. She's just there. I mean, yeah, there is a bit of a story behind the character, but I think they could potentially make a story revolving around her. Maybe she could get revenge on the other Tengu that the main characters killed. I don't know. What? What's your question? Oh my gosh. You can have a little bit. There you go. Get out of here.
I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 5.
Yeah. All right. Go, buddy. But anyways, yeah. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of different ways they can take the story further. But obviously Rig is what he's supposed to be, like Donovan's like son or adopted son or something like that. I don't know. And I'm pretty sure there's more they could work around with Rig, because he's technically kind of connected or related to the main villain. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, like we need more Donovan in the story, bro. Like I'm tired of him being a background character, this like secret, elusive character that we never get to see or really hear about. Like I think it's been long enough. He needs to show his face. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. I don't know how many more like you know, uh, freaking super soldier experiment type things they could bring out or whatever at this point. But you know, I'm pretty sure that the story has potential to evolve some more. You know, um, what else? What else could they do for DOA 7? Expand on the story, bring back tag mode, of course. Obviously, at this point, rollback is essential in modern fighting games. Rollback netcode is a must. You know. Um, what else? Maybe they could do like a world, like a casual mode, like kind of like how Virtua Fighter is doing World Stage, or whatever it's called. Um, let's see. Well, Tekken doesn't really have anything like that. I don't know. Um, what else? What else? What's some other cool stuff they could do? Um, I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's more casual stuff. Maybe bring back volleyball as a different mode. Instead of making it its own game, put volleyball. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that'd be a bad idea. I don't know. But then you could also include the male characters instead of just the female characters. You could also maybe include the male characters. Playing volleyball with everybody else. I don't know. I mean, what Tekken has Tekken Ball. So I mean, like, there's got to be something they could do with that, right? I don't know. I don't know. Something that isn't really fighting related, but still a fun casual mode that they could probably do. You know, I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think they could, do to add for like a casual mode? You know what I'm saying? Um, I mean, I don't know. Whatchamacallit? Oh no, yeah, take it easy on the, DLC practices, man. Like, we don't need new DLC costumes like every season, whether they be themed or not, you know. Um, yeah, like there was like so many collaborations with DOA 5 and probably 6 as well. Honestly, they could tone that down.
The TV's off now.
Okay, ask mommy for help.
I wasn't changing it, but
Okay.
I was
All right.
the controller.
Okay. Okay, ask mommy.
I didn't ask for mom.
All right, ask mommy for help. Oh goodness, I'm sorry, guys. Oh boy. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, like I'm sure there's some casual stuff they could do. Yeah, yeah. We don't need so many collaborations, because that just makes them look money hungry. Like yeah, people are gonna buy them, but make them more meaningful. I don't know, or even do some costume contests. I think they used to do that as well in the past. Costume contents. Give us some more offline content to unlock. You know, Instead of putting everything behind a paywall, give us some stuff to do that could help us unlock things in the game, like cosmetics or something. Like if you go back, for example, to the DOA in the old days, DOA 2, you had to literally play the game to unlock all those costumes. You didn't have to buy nothing. You had to just play the game and you would unlock more costumes and stuff over time. I feel like something like that needs to come back. You know, don't limit the characters to like what 2 or 3 or 4 different costumes. Like make us work for it, not pay for it, work for it. That's one thing I miss about old school games. You have to work for to unlock content, and that I feel like that's worth people paying the money and putting in the time to the game. You know, give us back to the ability to unlock stuff through gameplay. That's what made part of the game fun. Was because you wanted to unlock stuff for your favorite characters, but you have to play the game, you know. Oh, you got to play arcade mode with Jan Lee, for example, to unlock this costume, but then you got to play Time Attack with Jan Lee to unlock another costume, and etc. etc. Play King of the Hill Survival with Jan Lee, you know, survive 100 rounds and you'll get a costume, you know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that makes the game worthwhile, in my opinion, when you have to actually put time and effort and work into the game. You know, that's what creates longevity for games, for fighting games.
You will fix it in just a minute.
Okay, cool. I need you to go.
Yes, okay.
He's not here. Go. Dante. Oh, kid. Whatever. I'm just going to keep talking. So yeah, you know, stuff like that, you know, helps, you know, keep the game healthy and alive and creates longevity, you know. Like I would much rather, you know, put hundreds of hours into the game, you know, to make it worthwhile if it means I can achieve something or unlock something, you know, unlock something cool, than to have to freaking pay for it all the time. Not that I don't mind paying for content, but that shouldn't be the only avenue. You know what I'm saying? And I think they kind of tried to you know, do something like that with DOA 6, but they failed horribly, in my opinion. You know, I don't know. I don't want to have to, you know, earn fight tokens to then have to unlock stuff. Just make it automatic. Like just make it automatic. I don't have. Why do you have to play to earn gold or tokens just to unlock more stuff? You know, in a freaking like shop or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, stop monetizing games, fighting games so much. You know. I mean, it's fine. You want to do season passes or whatever. That seems to be the norm nowadays. And I'm pretty sure if DOA 7 ever comes out, you know, they're gonna probably do the season pass route, you know, because that's the norm nowadays. But you know, it's probably most likely gonna happen. But like I said, give us more ways and opportunities to earn stuff or unlock stuff, you know, outside of, you know, paying for stuff, you know. And if you're gonna charge us for stuff, make it like actually worth paying for, you know. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, like I said, those are just a couple ideas. I'm sure there's so many more things that they could do with DOA 7 to make it great.
He's leaving right now, but he can't
Okay.
fix the TV because he's late.
All right.
Please
Okay.
fix the TV.
I'll fix it in a little bit. Go.
Come on, fix it.
Go.
Follow me. Follow.
Please. I'll come. Hey. I'll come. Look. I'll come over there in 5 minutes, okay? All right, go. Go. Silly boy. Oh, man, this is going to be so weird. If anything, I hope it gets a few laughs out of this video. Like, haha. You know, his son is bugging him while he's trying to record a video. But that's my fault. I should have waited till the kid was asleep to record this, you know. It's in the middle of the day right now. You know. Excuse me. I should have known better. Should have waited till that kid was asleep so I could record this thing in peace, but oh man. At the very least, I hope it got some laughs. Yeah, I'm sorry if it annoyed some of you guys. But anyways, you know, I think this game has a lot of potential. You know, even to this day, even though I don't really play it as much as I used to, it's still one of my #1 favorite fighting game franchise of all time. You know, and you know, lately I've been picking it up a little bit more. Like I did enter a DOA 5 bracket a few weeks ago at my locals. You know, because you know there are some people, fortunately, that actually like the game or are interested in it. You know, and that was fun. I won that tournament. And you know, there have been a few times, you know, in the past month that I picked up DOA 6 and played online a little bit. but I usually don't play like any more than like maybe an hour or so, if that. You know, because DOA 6 online is it's not dead, but it's not very lively either. So every now and then I pick it up and play it a little bit, and then I put it back down because there are other games that I want to put more time into as well. Not just fighting games, but other games in general. But you know, yeah, I'm really, really, really hoping we will see Dead or Alive 7 on the horizon. You know, and you know, I'm sure it'll happen eventually. There's no way it won't come back. But regardless, I'm very hopeful. I think it still has potential, and hopefully, Dead or Alive 7 will be the DOA that helps it take off, like, you know, more than it ever did in the past. Um, but I mean, DOA 5, for the most part, it did pretty well. Even though it wasn't, the biggest fighting game out there, DOA 5 had a healthy scene, and a healthy tournament life, for a while. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, um, I think DOA still has potential, to be more recognized and respected. You know what I'm saying? Because there are people who love the game. There are people who still play it and still love it, even if it's not their main game. A lot of people got their start with this game and then, they would branch out, to other games over time. Um, so, yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll play some DOA 6 after recording this video. you know, I still have a soft spot for the game. No matter what happens, DOA always has a special place in my heart. Like I said, still my favorite of all time. Um, it's just right now, my attention is geared towards other games, but you best believe, when DOA 7 gets announced, I'm gonna be on that. I'm gonna be on that, and maybe that spark will come back again. But right now, I just, I don't have it like I used to. But you know, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. I'm very hopeful. For the past couple years or so, fighting games have slowly been making a resurgence. You know, like it's getting bigger, and of course, esports keeps growing and taking off in different directions and whatnot. So there's definitely potential for this game. You know, and I hope people realize that. And I hope Team Ninja understands that as well. There's still a chance for this game to shine like it, even brighter than before. Um, so if Team Ninja's listening to this, please, don't take anything I said personally, but just realize how passionate I am and a lot of other players are about DOA. You guys have you know, a gem in your pockets right here with DOA. You know, treat it with care. You know, um, but yeah, shout outs for all the people who I mentioned in this video. Shout outs to you all again. You guys are amazing. You guys, influenced me, in many ways and helped, nurture my love for the game over the years. Shout outs to Team Ninja, of course. You guys are great. Shout out to Tom Lee. I met him briefly once at TFC years ago. Didn't get to interact with you much, but I hope you're doing well, man. You know, blessings to you. Um, but and shout out to all of the DOA community. I love you guys. You guys make the game what it is. And thank you for the people who are taking interest in the game. That are either coming back to it or even at least dipping their toes in the water. It means a lot for the game. You have no idea. Shout outs again to Mike Hollow. for getting into the game as well. I'm glad that you like the game, man. That's amazing. I think we need more eyes on this game. And I think that would help. Help it take off as well. Maybe And thank you for the people who are keeping the game alive. Like, but yeah.
Baby fell off from the high chair.
What do you mean?
Baby fell off and he
Oh,
and
jeez.
fell on the floor. He fell on the floor.
All right.
Fell on the floor.
Okay, I'm coming. All right. Well, I think I have to cut the video off there. Oh man, I hope you guys didn't hear that. Probably did. All right, go. Hey, go play with him. Go watch him. Well, that's my cue. Oh man, what a crazy video. Like I said, I'm sorry for the constant interruptions. Sure, I hope it didn't, kill the vibe of the discussion too much. But thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Like I said, just wanted to get my thoughts and feelings out there. And again, sorry for the interruptions. I'm sorry if they bothered you guys, and I don't know, maybe they were funny. I don't know. But I was hoping to get more peace and quiet while making this video, but that life be like that. I gotta go be a dad right now. But anyways, peace out. Love you guys. Take care.